All right, man. So we're recording. I'm here with Ian Calvert, right? Is that how you say your last
Mm.
name? I always, I
That's how you
always,
say it.
I always
Well
wonder if
done,
I need
John.
an accent to do that. So you are in Cape Town right now, correct?
That's right.
You
Cape
live
Town,
there.
South Africa. I live here.
You live there.
Well, I live here, and I seem to live on an aeroplane as well, but mainly in Cape Town.
Do a bit of globe trotting. So for those that are listening, I know Ian. So from working with the Well and WellBuilt Bikes, we submitted an application to a program called Red Bull Amaphiko that we were accepted to, kind of a platform for really backing up and supporting social entrepreneurs throughout the globe, really. And that started, I mean, you started that really in South Africa, correct? And then it was in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and then now kind of spreading around the world. Um,
Correct. That's yeah.
and we met. So that was initially in Baltimore. What was that? That was about almost exactly 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yep. And
Hmm.
that was right when I remember being there. So that's when we met. I guess we would have met at the interviews, actually.
Yes, that's right.
We flew in for some interviews before being accepted. And that was right at the beginning of really well-built bikes. So the Well had been doing some work in the community for some time. And we had been running a little bike co-op out of a homeless drop-in center. It was in a shipping container. We'd never really done business per se. I think at that point we'd done a few pop-up shops. We'd sold a few bikes. We realized it was possible. And so Amaphiko was a huge springboard for us as we jumped in, and that's where we connected. And you've just been continuing this work and working with social entrepreneurs around the globe. And so I
Hmm.
was really excited you were willing to take some time with me to kind of dig into some of that, because I know, so for this show, The Work Ethic, we've been digging into concepts that are going to overlap tremendously with everybody that you work with. And I just think you bring such perspective from your own work, but then work from around
Hmm.
the globe. Why don't you just pick up where I'm leaving off on your own bio and your explanation of the
Sure.
program, and just kind of jump in and explain what you're up to?
Cool. Well, thanks, and it's great to reconnect with you, John. I think those days we spent in Baltimore were pretty special for everybody. Um,
Absolutely.
And yeah, so just for your listeners or your viewers, you'll probably pick up the strange kind of mid-Atlantic accent. So it's a little bit British and a little bit South African. So I grew up in a coal mining town up in the north of England. Um, in yeah, a long time ago. I won't give too much of my age away, but I've been kind of heading south ever since. So I grew up there. I studied at Birmingham University. I then went down to London to work for a while in the ad industry. And then in 1990, when all the changes started to happen in South Africa, where Nelson Mandela was released, the ANC was unbanned, all of a sudden, and I'd always been fascinated by the country, just because of its history and its culture. And how can a country that has so much amazing natural resources and amazing people kind of invent a system as fundamentally evil as apartheid?
Right.
Um, and in a way, it was kind of built on the equally questionable strategy of colonialism.
Hmm.
And anyway, so I came to South Africa in 1990, and it was just an amazing time to live in this country. Um, and where the country was asking fairly existential questions of itself, and still under the control of the white minority. But there was a stage where literally the white minority that had the vote, and they were the only people who had the vote, were asked in 1992 whether they wanted the government to continue on this path of transformation and democracy, basically, re-enfranchising or enfranchising the black population. And in fact, pulling into the theme of what we're talking about today in terms of work and leadership, the guy I worked with at the time, who was the owner of the ad agency that I came to work at in South Africa, he, and and I have to stress, it was a dangerous time. There was a lot of bloodshed, a lot of violence, a lot of sectarian, a lot of racial, tribal, however you want to call it. And so there was this referendum called, which again, it was the last time that only white South Africans were allowed to kind of post a ballot. But the question was, as I said, do you want the government to continue on its process of reform? So it's basically asking the white population, do you want to go backwards or do you want to go forwards? And the guy who was running the ad agency, a guy called Bob Rightford, took out double-page spreads in every national newspaper under his own name. And on the left-hand page was a series of stark images of the worst of apartheid. And on the top of that page was the headline, no, or basically just the one word, no. And on the right-hand page was a series of images of humanity and potential and love and growth, and across the top was the word yes. And so out of his own pocket, he paid for those advertisements to run in every national newspaper in South Africa. And he got death threats from extreme right-wing kind of reactionaries. And I thought, well, if ever you want to go to work in a morning believing in the person who's your boss, what better, what more could I ask than to work for somebody who has that kind of commitment and bravery to state his case for the world to see. And I suppose in my own way, having run before this journey with Amaphiko, just with the businesses I've run as an entrepreneur, it's like I'm always reminded of that actually, unless people believe in me, then what right do I have to get them to show up? Yeah. And if I can get them to show up with more than just the kind of going through the motions to earn a salary, but if they can come knowing that they're working for something far bigger than just, bringing in the money, if, the business that they're working for has a sense of its own purpose, that they have a sense of their own purpose in doing that, then to me, that's at the heart of what work should be about. So I stayed with that agency for another 6 years. I then started I left, as anybody in the ad agency does, at some stage you think of breaking away and your own kind of startup creative hot
I
shop.
could do this. Yeah,
I could do. How hard can it be, really? I mean, what could possibly go wrong? But no, look, and we did it, and we were backed by, because by this stage, Bob, the guy who I spoke about, he'd retired, and there was a new management team, and I just, we were all at that stage where we wanted to give it a go. And so we started our own ad agency. We had some backing from an international network group, and we did well. We grew it to be one of the top. At one stage within the first 2 years, we were the most awarded South African ad agency in terms of creative awards, both local and international. We had a growing client list. We were voted, top small agency in the country. So it was all cruising along. And then, as often in partnerships, when you've got at the time, fairly kind of alpha male guys, and I count myself in that, where there's a kind of sense of, where some of us, myself and one partner, it was all about the partnership, but for one other partner, it was more about the ego. Mm-hmm. And anyway, it was the slippery slope where, and I always say that business partnerships are much harder than marriages. You can, we talk about the divorce rate, in terms of marriage, but I think the divorce rate in terms of business partnerships is much higher, and they are much harder things to work at. And we went into the partnership really as really good friends, and unfortunately that kind of, it's not always the best recipe for business. But anyway, we had an amazing 6 years of that ad agency. Grew some amazing young people who are now, they're all kind of either chief executives or creative directors of big international networks. And then I suppose where my journey led to, or where the journey of what became Amaphiko first started. When I left that ad agency, a guy that I worked with, who was working for me at the time, we developed this idea, because South Africa, like a lot of emerging economies, has a very young population. Yeah. So at the time, the average age in South Africa was like 21 years old. Whereas in the US, I think the average age is like 36. In Japan, it's 38. So you got a really young population, and all marketers were really, keen to understand this youth market, this youth culture. And a lot of them were making really bad decisions on what products to launch, how to talk to them, usually based on a conversation over the dinner table with their 18-year-old daughter as the kind of bellwether for what the youth think about things. And in a country like South Africa, where 75 or probably 80% of the youth population is black and only now emerging from the kind of shackles of apartheid, anecdotal opinions can be quite dangerous at times.
Yeah.
So what we did was set up this. We went out and just found the most connected, the most, how can I put it? If you've read the book, The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell,
Yep.
He talks about them as mavens, people who know everything about something, so like experts in sneaker culture, experts in music culture, experts in, whatever it was. We had somebody out in the communities who at a street level knew everything that was to know about that topic. And we built a tech platform that enabled those people to kind of have real-time conversations with us. And it kind of revolutionized the way a lot of brands did their research into the youth market, how to understand youth. Because it was like real-time, high-speed trend spotting, consumer response. If you'd got a new product or something that you wanted feedback on, instead of having to brief a research company who would only come back 3 months later, we could tell you by 2:00 what the answer was.
Yep.
And through that, I got to meet just the most amazing hustlers, really, the most amazing young people who, yes, they were trying to make a living and trying to put food on the table, but there was this greater sense of that there's a bigger community here, that we're all hustling together, that as young Black South Africans, we are, we're demanding now to be heard. We're really helping to grow our communities and solve our communities' problems. And so I ran that business, and we grew that business in South Africa to start with, but then we developed networks of these young people up in the rest of Africa, into the Middle East. We opened an office in Russia. We ran a business out of Moscow for 5 years, and also into Japan. And this is all from just this little agency running out of Cape Town, South Africa. And really what that did, I guess, as I say, was inspire me about the power of movements and the power of youth culture. And so many of those people, whilst they might not have, they wouldn't have considered themselves as an employee of our business, but they were really invested in the community of building this thing. And I think, I'm sure some of your guests have spoken about it already, but with the whole shift towards the gig economy, towards, really being your own LLC, that you're building yourself as a business, as an asset, that whilst you might go and work for other companies or be employed by other companies, you're really just loaning them your asset for a while before you move on to the next thing. And so really that had a profound influence on the way, because I grew up in the kind of 1980s command and control structure.
Yep.
You work for these big, at the time in London, I was working for a big ad agency. And you knew your place, and, you worked, and it was the sort of Calvinistic work ethic.
Yep. And you have a career mapped out for you.
And my father worked for the same company in the north of England. He worked for the same textile company from when he left the army to when he retired at the age of 65, and he got his gold watch, and they looked after, and he's reaping the benefits of it now. You know, he's still,
Good.
God bless him, he's 91 years old and still getting a pension from all the years that he worked. And so he was probably one of the last guys of that era who took that approach. Mm-hmm. And now we're in an era where we're probably all going to have 3 or 4 different jobs, if not different careers, by the time we're 30, 35 years old. And then, so having run that business, one of the projects that we were given, you know, we'd been working with Red Bull for a long time, keeping them connected with youth culture, and particularly, you know, for a brand which, you know, is a sort of quite, you know, premium European brand, you know, to connect them with African culture, with African street culture, but whether it be in terms of sport or music or culture generally. So we'd been working with them on projects for a while, and then they came to us in 2012 and said, "Look, you know, there's a shift here, you know, with this new generation of what we now call millennials are expecting different things from us as a brand." And so anyway, we embarked on this journey of trying to unpack what social entrepreneurship meant initially in a South African context, because South Africa is like the kind of crucible of social change, if you like, or the power of people, in the case of Mandela, you know, of one person to bring about fundamental social change. So we went out and explored this thing. We met through our networks. We met these amazing people who were trying to solve a problem in the community, trying to make a living out of it, had no idea what social entrepreneurship was, but they were just being it anyway. And that whole belief that, you know, if you're going to do something for good, you don't always have to do it for free. You know, this fundamental principle of
it's a tough lesson.
Charity. And you of all people, coming from your background, where there's this sort of sense that, you know, and there's a great book, I'm sure you read it, called Uncharitable by Dan Pallotta.
I read half of it and then I handed it to a board member.
Well, just watch the 20 minutes.
That's what I did. I did the TED talk.
Exactly.
I was like, I got the punchline.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of that is how, you know, and I think particularly in the US, you know, there's this culture of philanthropy, which is, you know, very well intentioned, but this culture of non-profit. Yeah. That if you're doing good in the world, you've got to do it for free. And again, Dan Pallotta says, you know, a lot of that comes from religious, you know, it's that Calvinistic thing that we as human beings are fundamentally sinful, and therefore part of our existence and our mission on the planet is to redeem ourselves for that by doing good things for other people. And we therefore shouldn't expect to make a living out of that. And I mean, he goes on to talk about it in the sense of, you know, as a charity, when you're given, or when you're running it as a nonprofit and people fund you, that you're just not allowed to run it as a sustainable business. You know, you can't pay decent salaries. You can't spend money on marketing and advertising. It's like they want you to create all this impact, but with wearing a pair of handcuffs.
Yep.
So anyway, so this belief that you can do good and make a living at the same time. You know, people talk about do good and doing well. I mean, it's not even about doing well in terms of being, you know, doing well has that sense of being comfortable, you know, but at least, you know, if you can put some food on the table and you've got a roof over your head and you can pay the bills at the end of the month, if that's doing well, then that's great. But you know how hard it is at times to stay true to that mission and that purpose. But that's what it was all about. It was trying to find the people who had a personal connection with the problem they were trying to solve. Yep. Yeah. And I remember when we heard your story, when we met you in the interviews, and just your connection with the people you're trying to serve was so profound. And that's the thing, you know, it doesn't matter what background you come from. But the reality is, unless you have that deep personal connection where you can fully empathize and you understand all the complexities around those issues. And as you know, homelessness, for example, is one of the most complex systems that you can wish to try and understand, because it touches on so many other aspects. And so if you'd come in there as a kind of with an MBA in social entrepreneurship from Stanford University, and you decided you were going to come in and solve the homeless problem in Tampa, then you would have seen your backside, because you don't understand the context. And the same thing, we see it all the time in Africa, where lots of well-intentioned outsiders, and this is ironic coming from me as a kind of white Yorkshireman.
Yep.
We see these people coming in and trying to solve other people's problems for them. And all I try and get people to understand is that all we're doing by taking the agency away from them is building dependency.
And deeper entrenching of poverty. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's a really amazing social enterprise that I do some work with down here. They did a study and they found that but by just doing 3 simple acts. So like if you give the same person something, all it takes is 3 gifts to make them fully dependent on you. Yeah. And by gifts, I mean, handouts. So it's like, the first startup point, they're saying, well, look, maybe I can, I'm really committed to making this work. I want to find a job, or I want to start my business. I'm just not there yet. And so you give them money for the first time and they say, thank you. And then the second time it's, look, I'm really struggling, but I'm still committed to making this work, but I'm just not quite there yet. And then the second handout comes. And then by the time, and then the third thing is maybe I'm just not good enough. I can't make this work. Please, won't you give me something? And that third hit, boom, you've created dependency. Whereas if you're building capacity, so you're not necessarily handing out, but you are, it's the old, I know it's cliched, but it's not a hand out, but it's a hand up. If you're helping them, first, and I think a lot of it, we talk about lived experience. So many people, I mean, and some of your cohort, some of those amazing guys in Baltimore, whether you look at Brittany Young from B360, Walker Marsh, Dominic Nell, they've come from some of the toughest communities in the country, and that's tough communities in what, the US is the leader of the free world and supposedly the most developed country. But those people have got so much strength and power that comes from their lived experience, but they don't necessarily know how to unlock it. Or, and so many people in similar situations in South Africa in a kind of township environment, they, who are we as kind of privileged white people to talk to them about resilience and resourcefulness? They know more about resilience and resourcefulness than we will ever know. Yeah. But they still somehow suffer from that imposter syndrome. It's like, particularly when you bring them into new audiences and you introduce them to funders or corporates, or, you put them on a stage, they have that huge imposter syndrome. It's like, do I deserve to be here? And yet, if you can help them unpack all the stuff they've learned through their lives, all those challenging circumstances that they've been in, and get them to see that those are amazing capabilities and amazing strengths and amazing assets, then that's the most important gift you can give them. Don't just go and try and take their problem away from them. At least give them the dignity of solving their own problem, and just give them the capacity and the resources to do it. So anyway, I hope this is okay. I'm just kind of, rolling now.
Yeah, no, this is great. And so, okay, well, I'll take the little break here because I've been just jotting some notes down, and we've covered like 15 things I want to dig in on. I'm trying to think of the right approach to that. All of this, I think you were kind of leading into some of the some concrete people that you started partnering with where you're at.
Mhm.
I want to start circling back to some of these, but I actually want to ask you to
Sure.
give tell me about one of those people, the earliest of those folks that you were working with, that just, here's someone here locally that we've worked with, social entrepreneur, that maybe didn't know that word, but they're hustling in the community. And they're committed to a problem. They're trying to make a living, that you guys came alongside. Yep.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, it's always hard. It's hard to choose. It's like, how do you pick your favorite child?
You have one though.
No, well,
You're
look,
not supposed to say it.
Yeah. No, look, there's one guy that I'll talk about that he was part of our first cohort of Amaphiko, but I'd actually known him for years.
Okay.
And yeah, he's a young guy from a township just outside. It's between Johannesburg and Pretoria. It's a township called Tembisa, and it's a tough neighborhood. And he's a dancer called Jarell Matubula, and there's an amazing style of dancing, South African dancing, called Pantsula. And it's a weird mishmash of African dancing with hip hop dancing, with locking and popping and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But what he did was start called the Indigenous Dance Academy. And what he would do is just get kids off the streets, because there's huge gang issue, like in a lot of neighborhoods. There's big gang issues, and peak recruitment time for gangs is as schools get out and before the kids are on their way home, and they're hanging out on the street in the late afternoon, and that's the most vulnerable time. So what he did was created this after-school dance academy literally in a backyard of a shack in Tembisa, and used that not just to teach the kids dance and dance moves, but life skills and discipline and self-esteem and respect for others. And he used to survive by, it's an amazing style of dance. And so he was part of that business I was describing, the sort of the youth trend spotting business. And we would start getting him the odd corporate gig. And all of a sudden, you got these brands paying him a few $1,000s for him and his boys to come and perform. And then all of a sudden, those boys see that actually they're earning some money, and that I can make a career out of this. And so, yeah, I worked with him for about 4 or 5 years before Red Bull Amaphiko started. And then he was one of the first cohort. And now I've reconnected with him recently, and I'm hopefully going to be collaborating with him on a big project where he now literally has direct access to, I suppose it's the equivalent of the state governor. So it's the premier of one of the big provinces in South Africa, who now uses him and his dance crew to drive young people into some of the job creation programs, and some of the economic opportunities are there. And he's now a fully sustainable, growing social enterprise that has had so many people graduate through his program. He's learned so much about business. He's learned so much about humility as well, and putting other people first. So there's nothing radically, because there's lots of similar dance programs all over the US that are using dance as a way. But often some of those programs, it's like dance as a way out of the community. But for him, it was a dance as a way of growing people within the community and building pride and esteem within the community. There's another guy who was part of that first cohort called Zakeni Ngubo, who grew up in a tough township in Durban, South Africa, called Umlazi. And when he graduated high school, he basically got distinctions in every subject except maths, which he failed because he hadn't had a maths teacher for the last 3 years of his high school education, because township schools are notoriously under-resourced. Anyway, he managed to eventually get his high school diploma. He went on to university, but his mission coming out of that was that no kid from his community should ever have to go through the same thing he did. And in South Africa, as you and your listeners will know, we have 11 11 official languages. And the most widely spoken language in the country is Zulu. And so many kids who grow up speaking nothing but Zulu for the first few years of their life end up being educated in this English language education system. And when you're dealing with concepts like math and science, that can be tough. So what he did was, and he also he worked for a mobile company and saw the power of mobile. So what he did was he went and found the best Zulu language maths and science teachers, got them into a classroom for like 2 weeks, and got them to record the entire grade 10, 11, and 12 curriculum for maths and science in Zulu, broke it up into downloadable video format. And then what he does is now, I mean, the business has gone through various evolutions, but he's now partnered with, it's like a local area network, like a local Wi-Fi box that people can log on to using any kind of Wi-Fi enabled device, so whether it's a smartphone or a tablet or whatever. And whilst you're dealing in fairly poor neighborhoods or under-resourced neighborhoods, there's still, a lot of the kids now have access to at least that kind of technology. And so they're then able to download all of that content onto their device. And the device not only tracks the downloads, but then cross-tabulates with their grades. And he's now helped 150,000 kids improve their maths and science tuition. He's now one of the largest insurance companies in South Africa that puts millions of dollars into university bursaries. They've now made him, because what he's able to do is not only track their academic progress, but also track their appetite for learning and everything, all through data gathered through the system.
Yep.
And they've now asked him to be their major identifier and screener for varsity bursaries, which is worth a fortune to him as his business, but it means that he can really identify the people, not necessarily the ones who are just getting the best grades, but the ones who day in, day out,
hungry. They're like
hungry. Exactly. Exactly. So there might be a C student who became a B student, or a B student who became an A student, but you can just see how they're interacting with the system. And so he's now at a point where he's just about to sign a big impact investment deal with somebody who's going to scale into the next level. So he's been running that hustle for like 5 years, doing amazing things, but he's never, at no point on that journey has he ever thought he's made it, because something will happen. You think you've signed this brilliant contract with the Department of Education, and then you realize that it's going to take you 9 months to get the money out of them. There's just so much kind of incompetence and bureaucracy. And when you think you've got a grant and it's all signed, but then getting the congratulatory email and then the money arriving in your account isn't always the quickest thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me dig in there. I think so. As the identifier role, that just really stood out to me, in the idea of like, because you can think about, I guess, as you were talking throughout this, you said, well, there's the old school, dad worked at the same place forever. Kind of, this was the way you got an income. Many of us are going to go through many careers or iterations of what we're doing. I think several times used where there's a shift. There's a shift going on. And I actually think my own experience is a lot, whether it's the nonprofit, for-profit, and like there's I think a paradigm shift taking place even with the emergence of social enterprises. Not that these things haven't existed, or that the Amish or the Girl Scouts or whoever weren't already figuring out a way to do this. I think monasteries have been doing that forever, but there is an emerging ecosystem for social entrepreneurship, and it's taking more of a forefront. And so there's an idea around, like, I don't know, you said, well, someone's trying to solve a problem in their community, trying to do okay, make a living, get by, be able to eat, where it's not maybe primarily about financial return. Then you lay out these students, and he's looking at it's like, it's not the ones that are just getting A's, but there's the ones that are in it, that are hungry, that are digging in deeper. And then in several of your stories, like this idea of hustle. So there's like hustle and hunger and drive. Kind of those are attributes of something like a growth mindset, someone that's like really like locked onto a problem or fixated on something that maybe they haven't figured out a solution or don't know the answer or whatever, but they're committed to it, whether it's because of where they are, who they are, or some temperamental feature inside of them. But that kind of emerged over several of those things you're talking about. And I want to ask you to explicitly speak maybe to that hunger. Why would they want to identify those kids rather than maybe the one that just got the best grades all the time?
Sure. Let me just think about that. Yeah, I think, we are at that, and I'm gonna hopefully I don't go too far off topic here, but
you're good.
Where everybody now, and I don't know if it's the same in the US, but everywhere people are talking about the fourth industrial revolution. That it's this thing where the skills that we're going to need going forward in this technological age, we're going to need coding skills. We're going to need people who can write algorithms. We're going to people. It's all about STEM education. Yeah, and don't think I'm having it's
belittling that. Sure.
It's absolutely important.
Yep.
But all you have to do is look at what happens when some of the power of that coding and algorithms and the power of big data gets into the hands of people with no value systems. Like, if you've watched the movie The Great Hack, which is the Cambridge Analytica, how the influence on the US elections, on Brexit, on so many things now. And that's what happens when you don't build the other side of the equation. And so we're not, so going back to your point, human traits, so the fundamental human characteristics of empathy and dignity and resourcefulness and ethics and I can go on and on. We've got to find a way in our education systems and our workplaces to make sure that we're valuing those things as much as we're valuing technical skills, and academic skills, and and I'm sure you've seen Ken Robinson's, I think it's the most watched TED Talk in history, about how schools are killing creativity, and that so much of our education system is the natural sort of trajectory of what we're grooming these kids for is to become academic professors at university level. It's this whole focus on academics and on cognitive processing, etc. Whereas you look at really some of the people who've been the most profound change makers or had impact in business or whatever, the people who didn't necessarily follow that path, but had that hunger, and that inquisitiveness and that burning passion to do something, that those values and how we teach them is the tricky thing. But those things in the modern age that we're in, where technology can pretty much do everything that we can do, into artificial intelligence, what are the things that we uniquely can do? And evidently somebody's busy writing a program now that is teaching computers to have empathy. Whether they'll succeed or not, but let's rather look at the things that make us uniquely human.
Yep.
And I attended a really interesting session on the future of South African education recently, and there was a guy there who is a real sort of edutech pioneer, and he said, "Listen, I built, I'm a geek, I understand algorithms, I've built these online courses, etc. But if I had to pick the four things that we need to be teaching our children, it's creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. To think critically about things, to ask difficult questions, not to remember things by rote and just regurgitate facts. I mean, we don't need to learn facts anymore. at the click of a button, we can get any fact from Google we need. What we need to be able to do is how to process that data, process that thinking. So it's those 4 C's: creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. And I would add one 5th one, which is compassion. And at the heart of everything, unless we are fundamentally doing what we're doing every day so that not only I can improve my situation in life, but I can have compassion and empathy for people in other situations and help them do the same. So yeah, it's a big kind of mission of mine at the moment. Yep. We cover some of it through the Amaphiko program, but it's something that I want to pursue kind of beyond that, where that's what's going to save our planet is people where your human muscles are developed. And I've really become a believer, if you want to train the mind, yes, you can study and you can go to school and you can do this and that. And if you want to build the body, then you go to gym and you work out and you can build those muscular reflexes. And I'm a great believer that somewhere in our body are some human muscles that if you work on enough, that you can develop those muscles and you can develop human, that muscle reflex. So that means, so when you put in a situation,
yep,
that cortex in your brain somewhere takes over, where instead of your logical prefrontal cortex, which is all about the rational assessment of that. And I think if we can generally build better human beings by trying to, and I don't know what the solution is, but whatever input we need to get that outcome, we need to put some serious work into finding it.
I don't know if this is exactly what you're addressing, but it immediately made me think of maybe a brutal lesson I've been learning over time. So I am not probably by nature very patient, right? As soon as I decide something, I want to start moving on it, and I'm not great at waiting. But I think that's an important attribute for anyone, right? Especially if you're working with other people or you need to see anything kind of play out over time. Things take time to come to fruition. And I think, so for lack of a better way of putting this, I would realize I need to grow in this way and let's say pray to be patient, right? Like God, make me more patient. And the terrible reality of an answer to that, kind of be careful what you pray for or ask for, is what you are given is opportunity to wait. Right. There is in some sense, some necessary exposure therapy that takes place. Like, okay, cool. You want to be patient, wait. And I think in many of the what I assume you mean in those kind of human attributes, right? There actually, I'll just run with this because you actually several times said there's like a religious, almost Calvinist kind of work, like this work ethic of redemptive work or whatever that takes place. It's kind of an old school mind in the let's say in that religious template, although I think it works in other ways too. There was over time, religious people would say, hey, you need to be orthodox, right? You have the right thinking. And so you have the right ideas about God or whatever it is. And over time, other people would emerge and say, well, sure, but you can have all the right ideas. If you don't do anything, it's not worth anything. And so there was an argument for what they call like orthopraxy. You need to have the right practice. You need to have the right doing. You need to flesh that out. And I think that was a good and right move, and really came out of a lot of that really in Latin America, liberation theology, things like that started to emerge in this idea of orthopraxy. And then eventually people would come along and say, well, that's great. There's a passage that would be used a lot for this where Paul wrote, well, if I surrender my body to the flames, but don't have love, it's nothing. And so there was an idea of like, you need to have the feeling, the right pathos, the right feelings. And so it's like, yeah, you can do a loving thing, but eventually you need to convert and actually have a compassion or loving heart. Right. And there's this cool template and maybe an idea, like there is something good in each of those moves. But for myself, I have kind of come to the conclusion that, and so I looked this up because I wondered if it was a word. Turns out I may have made it up in this way, but it is a word. So orthotopic is the the word I came up with. If you look that up, it's used it's only used in medical language. So it's this organ is in the right place. A topical cream goes on a spot.
Yeah, a spot.
So
yeah.
topic is orthotopic. And I guess I came to the conviction that there is an orthotopic life. So you have to be in the right place, which in my mind is among suffering or pain or poverty, or so like you painted a picture, people come in from the outside of a scenario with a solution, but without an understanding of the context of the pain. And so in my mind, I was like, well, if you live among, or you're one of those in suffering or in that place, or just, let's say, learning empathetic understanding of those things, even if it isn't your own circumstance, that out of that emerges, it will break your heart. You will feel it. You will do something because it demands action. And in my mind, it's the only way to think straight, to think right, because it is giving you the vantage point necessary for, let's say, analysis, right? Like that there is something of the existential circumstance as like a starting place. Anyway, all this just responding to your own saying, like, I don't know what that is that we need to develop, but it is like, and I think if I look at my own work over time, the work of the Well, I go, actually, I think the thing I've actually been doing is trying to create spaces where people interact across racial or economic divides, because I'm trying to recreate for them on both sides what happened to me in those interactions, right? And going, I need to get you to the same table to listen to one another, to talk to one another. And it is in those interactions, maybe that takes place. I don't know if you want to, if you just stirring thoughts, or if there's anything you want to respond to there.
Yeah, well, look, just on your point about patience, and it ties into what you were just saying. You found your place, your topical location.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as you said, that's where you feel your true self, your true calling. Is amongst homeless people. Yeah. And all of the things that gather around that. As we said, it's highly complex. And too often, I think, as social entrepreneurs, we think we found the solution to that problem, and we want to then accelerate that solution as quickly as possible. Yeah. And we use like accelerate and accelerators and scaling, all of this. Scale that.
See what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. But one of our other, again, a South African girl, one of our early cohort, she always said, and I think this would resonate with you, that you've got to be married to the problem, not married to the solution. And because just on your journey with the Well and WellBuilt Bikes and everything else, the solution might change, and it'll iterate and tip and all pivot and all of those fancy terms we use. But ultimately, because it is your place, it's your calling, it's where you feel your biggest contribution can be made, is because you are married to that problem. Yeah. When you're married to the problem, sometimes you've got to listen to the problem, and you've got to understand the problem. You've got to take the time to do that, not rush out to solve it the whole time, because then you're going to burn out. You're going to lose credibility amongst your community if you keep doing that. And so patience, I absolutely agree, is a hugely underrated virtue in the world that we live in. Partly because, and I would use, we take a slightly longer term view of it, but some of these accelerator programs, they're like 6 months. You're supposed to come in, crack your business model, sort your funding strategy out, get your scaling model out, and then you're out of there after 6 months, which is just fundamentally stupid.
It's stupid.
To think that and there was a great analogy, or a great lesson we had recently. We had the most recent South African Academy. Sorry, I'm using a lot of South African.
That's great. All good.
Yeah, but we had a woman come and speak to the group in Durban, and she'd just become the first Black African woman to climb Mount Everest.
Nice.
And she is a woman called Saray Kumalo, just inspirational woman. And this was her 4th attempt at climbing Everest. And on her 3rd attempt, she made it within 200 meters of the summit. Yeah. And ended up having to turn around and not push that final journey. And you can imagine, because it's not a cheap exercise, you know, it costs you like $100,000 to climb Mount Everest. And she'd raised all this funds, and this was her 3rd trip already.
Wow.
And yet she asked the guide and said, "Is this safe? Are we putting our lives in danger by doing this?" And he said, "Yes, you are, because to get that next 200 yards or 200 meters to the summit, that'll only take you maybe an hour, but it's going to take you 2 hours to get back to where we are now. And the weather's changing, the temperature's dropping. And sure enough, most people who die on Everest die on the way down, not on the way up, because they pushed things a little bit further. So for her to have the patience to say, no, I'm not going to do it. And then she came back, and 2 years later, she actually made it. And she said in her own life, and she's a very successful entrepreneur and businesswoman, that it's just knowing, you know, there's this whole macho narrative around taking risks and pushing, and you know, if you're not living on the edge, you're not taking up, you know, you're taking up too much space and all of that stuff. But every now and again, the really successful people know that when just to be patient, and where risk becomes danger, not just percentages. So if you take both of those ideas that we just unpacked about being married to a problem, yeah, and that solutions may come and go and they may succeed or fail, but if you're married to the problem and you're patient, and as you say, you can't just sit on your ass the whole time and not do anything.
That's right.
But as long as you're moving the agenda forward, either in the learning that you're having or the conversations that you're having, but it has ultimately got to be goal related. And too many people in this world that you and I inhabit, there's so many talk shops and so much conversation, and very few people actually make things happen. So it's finding that balance. I know that sounds contradictory in a way, but it's, you know, that you're learning and you're just making sure you fully understood the dimensions of the system you're trying to tackle. And systems change and all of that kind of stuff is hugely complex. But as long as you don't, the process isn't the goal in itself. The process is just the journey to get to the solution, hopefully.
Interesting. Okay, so there's a lot in there. I'm curious about that very last line that you said, because there is a way in which you said the process isn't the goal, but it's part. I'm trying to unpack what you just said that last line, because for me, I guess for me, there's part of it's funny because it derailed what I was actually going to ask you, but I wanted to zero in on that, make sure I understand what you're saying. So, because for me, there is something about like embracing the process itself as the ends, right? Like as like you know, like, I mean, I know. Well, like Gandhi said, the ends are contained within the means, which I know for him had a lot to do with the methods with which we pursue our goals, right? Yeah. But also like there being something about like, I don't know, man, I guess the closest I could think of is Huey P. Newton, revolutionary suicide. Are you familiar with Huey P. Newton? So he was one of the leaders of the Black Panther Party here in the States. And he wrote a book called Revolutionary Suicide. And the idea, well, basically he's like, look, in this country, there is no place for a Black man, and we are going to end being killed or imprisoned. And so many of our brothers are killing themselves in what is effectively an existential reaction to the circumstances. Like it is a reactionary suicide. He's like, but suicide lays ahead of us. Like there is no good life option for us here. And so he made a call for what he called revolutionary suicide. But it was like, look, I'm going to crash into the biggest pillar I can. I'm going to give my life to the revolution. knowing full well that I won't be around to see it, right? Like, but to lay my own life down as contribution or sacrifice toward the ends for the sake of generations to come, right? Anyway, for me, there's something about the idea of holding on to goals with an open hand, not necessarily the aims or the trajectory, but the results, because they're not promised. They're not. And anyway, that last line just stood out to me as like the process isn't the goal, but I'm like, oh, what? Unpack that a little bit. If you get the question I'm driving at. Yeah.
I absolutely do. And I think, and you're absolutely right. And as you were speaking there, I was thinking of our good friend and brother, Matthew Kincaid, who I don't know if you saw his post recently where, he's worked out that no matter what he achieves, he will never see in his own lifetime the goal of what he's setting out to achieve. But his process is the goal, the journey is the destination.
Yeah.
I suppose what I was talking about is that sense of, being married to the problem, that so many people sit in that assessment and planning phase before. So it's like, it's like they sit and make sure they've understood the map of where they're traveling to, but they haven't actually set off yet.
That makes perfect sense.
And that there's too much. I mean, I've done a lot of work lately with Ashoka on systems change and unpacking systems, and you always meet. I'm not saying within Ashoka, but in life in general, you always meet these people where there's a sort of bit of an intellectual jousting that actually I understand the complexity of this problem much more than you do, so you end up. And obviously you want to have that deep, full 360, multifaceted understanding of a problem like homelessness or whatever the issue, institutionalized racism, whatever it may be. But then, so you've got to have that understanding, but then you've actually got to say, right, well, we're now going to do something about it. And sure, having that understanding and having some of those conversations can be part of a process of learning and healing, etc. But that then at least starting out on the journey with what seems to be the direction that you need to start with. So at least sort of taking that first step and then keeping on going. And you might get to a dead end and then take a few steps backwards and then walk in another direction. So it doesn't actually matter whether you get to the goal or not, but then the journey. But too often in our world, people just never leave the starting point. They're busy re-examining the map the whole time.
No, I'm so glad I asked you to clarify that because I think you're exactly right. And I almost think we're plagued with theorists, and practitioners are too busy to teach. Yeah. So people out here doing it are not writing books necessarily because they're busy doing it. And then the people writing books often aren't the people out doing it. Right. And so even as you lay out, it's like we get so caught up in planning, mapping, laying out our strategic plan that we're not doing. And I guess like what I hear you describing and what I would say is like my own way of putting it is like in terms of just being let's say just, I don't know what's called, I think practical philosophy is like, you got an idea, and you could think about that idea, but part of thinking about that idea is embodying the idea. Like go do it. And then you're going to find out really quick, like, oh, that got me punch in the mouth. That was maybe not the most practical way forward or what, like, and then go back and think, and then go back and do, and then go back and think. And that cycle as being maybe an intelligent approach to just about any problem, right? Is that there needs to be experimentation, reflection, experimentation. Okay. So you were describing this woman, forgive me, I forget her name, that climbed the Everest.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested in this. So it's her third time up there. She can't complete it, almost to the end, decides to come and then goes back again.
Yeah.
And there is in me a huge admiration of something like grit and tenacity. Like when I see that in an individual, I think it is my favorite attribute in human beings, right? It's like, it is like a pit bull with lockjaw. It's the thing that I am most interested in and fascinated with. It makes me tremble when I see examples of it. But I also know there's wisdom in the story that is, I backed off on the third time. Right. And there's like, yeah, this isn't the moment. And so you laid out, like, there's this approach, like, oh, risk more, put it all on the line. You didn't have what it takes. And so and you said, it sounds almost like a contradiction. Like there's a really, and this is like the paradox that exists in all good principles or rules. There's some paradox that exists there. I'm curious if, I don't know how to ask that question. Okay, I'll go back. Your buddy Bob took out a spread, yes, no, and the kind of vote, and he went in and it said, and you said he funded it himself. It was risk. There was risk of violence. There was major commitment. It took bravery. And I go, so trying to land on the actual question here, but the attribute that risks, that takes bravery, that makes moves like that, but also says this isn't the right play. And like, can you speak to whether that's intuition, wisdom, knowledge? What is that would guide us moving forward as we come to the next obstacle, the next cliff, the next summit, and we go get after it and risk and sacrifice, or be wise and regroup? Do you have any kind of like governing principle here?
If I did, I would be probably some Nobel Prize winner by this stage. I think I don't know. I suppose all we can do is share our own kind of guidance. That's it. Sometimes, so in Bob's situation, I mean, it was literally a moral imperative for him, an ethical imperative, and there was no going back. Yeah, there was no going back.
You die on this hill.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, as a South African, if somebody is going to, because I forgot the other part, he actually put his name and telephone number in the corner of the ad deliberately.
Wow.
And so, he has big kahunas to do that.
I like it.
But ultimately there's no, in something like that, there's no kind of percentage, there's no margin, there's no kind of, it's either right or it's
all
wrong.
In, right? He's all in on it.
Exactly. Yep. So and it's the old thing, that you have to do what's right, and if there's a clear moral imperative, then you have to do it. But you're right, there are and that's, it's easy to say and put that on headlines of books and stuff, but ultimately life is not black and white, it's gray. And it's those shades of gray, and where, okay, yes, I know this is right, but is what I'm about to do going to have the right impact? And isn't it better to regroup? I suppose it's that angel devil conversation that we all have. It's when the frontal cortex, the thinking bit, takes over from some of those more deep-seated. I mean, the whole start with why thing, the Simon Sinek, the golden circle, and he talks about, the most powerful decisions are taken by our limbic brain, which is not, our prefrontal cortex deals with logic and reason, and that's the little thing that snaps away in our ears the whole time. Should you really be doing this? Is this the best thing to do? But the most powerful decisions we make are on an emotional, visceral level in our limbic brain, which is a non-verbal, non-cognitive brain, but it's that gut feel. And it's always the conversation between the two. And I know you wanted to chat about flow states at some stage, and that's maybe a good segue into
transitions
that,
do it.
Because, and it's not so much on that sense of bravery and risk, but because a flow state, whether you access it through, surfing a giant wave, or, jumping out of an airplane, skydiving, or whatever, those sort of moments where we're in the zone. But like musicians get them, when they're a jazz musician will talk about being in the pocket, where like a Charlie Parker, he couldn't play the same solo twice, but he just gets into that zone where his reflexes and what they've found from the neuroscience of it is, I mean, when you're in flow, you've got all sorts of your neurotransmitters of firing, your serotonin's on full bore, your dopamine's on full bore, your norepinephrine, what is it?
Norepinephrine?
Norepinephrine, that's the one. So it's like this highly complex drug, but the most important thing is that your prefrontal cortex switches off. Yeah, they call it transient hypofrontality. And there's those guys from the Flow Genome Project who know it better than I do. But it's basically transient, so it only happens for a short period of time. Hypo, which is the opposite of hyper, so hypo as in lack of, frontality, which is your front thing. So you basically stop questioning yourself. You get out of your own way. And it's that little voice, those doubts that we have. And what I think McKinsey or somebody, no, in fact, it was some sort of lab somewhere, found a way of just everyday office workers, just sort of knowledge workers doing their general thing. They put these electrodes on the head and managed for large portions or for periods of the day to knock out their prefrontal cortex. So basically they stopped questioning themselves and they just got on and did stuff.
Because of the electrodes.
Because of the electrodes, yeah. So the electrodes actually switch that part of your brain off.
Is this real quick? Is this the same as the people that are shocking themselves with batteries, on the side of their head? This is happening all over the place. People are doing this as a way to
Well, look, because the other way of doing it is microdosing with microdosing with LSD.
Yep.
It just turns that off.
Yep.
And there's lots of medical theory around. You talk about risk and reward. There's the benefits of microdosing, but also the risks if you get it wrong or your own particular neurochemical structure isn't right. But what they've discovered is that if you, as a worker, you don't have to be like a Red Bull athlete or a jazz musician, but if you can access the flow state more often, you become, and McKinsey did a study on it, you become 500% more productive. And which basically means you can show up to work on a Monday and get through 5 days of work. So you can basically take Tuesday through Friday off. And so looping back to where we started with this, it's that if we can just be the master of that little voice in our head, which questions, which constantly questions whether we're doing the right thing, but leave it enough room to talk in those emergency situations where we're about to do something foolish, like walk those last 200 meters on Everest, but just give it that little window to say, okay, you can talk now. And so it's knowing when to listen to it and when not to listen to it. And I don't think there's any clear kind of guiding line to be able to do that. And it is, and again, talking about flow states, it can be, it's addictive to try and get into those states.
Yep.
But you've got to be careful that you're enjoying them for what they are. So you're in the flow and everything becomes selfless. So you lose your sense of self, you lose your sense of time, it all becomes effortless. It's this rich, multi-dimensional experience where your pattern recognition is off the charts and you're seeing connections in the world, and it's like complete synchronicity. But that's not a good time to make life-changing decisions, because everything is beautiful. So the experts say, look, enjoy that for what it is, and the cumulative experience of getting your brain into that state, it's like colonic irrigation for the brain. You just clear all that shit out, and your brain works better. But just be careful not to make too many decisions about jobs, relationships, financial investments when you're in that zone, because everything looks beautiful and everything will look like a good idea.
It'll all work out.
It'll all work out. Exactly. Yeah.
So it's funny, you were talking about someone climbing. I mean, Everest, which it's interesting just as my own illustration. So I have no experience with that kind of climbing. I have the only experience climbing I have is it's called Vertical Ventures here in town. There's a wall that's you pay to go in and climb this little wall with holds, like a rock climbing place. And I started going there for a while, and I realized something about myself in there, because they did something to me. So I can climb to a certain place and then I fall. I can climb to a certain place and then I fall. And my mind, I realized this is the best kind of situation for me. I got so obsessed with the next hold that, like, I didn't want to leave. I wanted to get back first thing in the morning. I didn't care about anything else I had going on. It was like a weird thing, but all I saw was that yellow hold that I couldn't reach. And I didn't want to talk to anyone. I just wanted to keep and then as soon as I got it, I was a little bit celebratory, and I'd see, okay, can I do it twice? But it was immediately the next one. Right. And it's interesting because I actually think that is, for me, was a lesson in kind of this being situated for something like a flow state. Was it had to be just beyond me. Right? Like something to fixate on that I just can't quite do, but not so far beyond me that it's going to kill me. Right? Like I wasn't over there with the professionals on the thing that they were, that would kill me for having done. And I just think, man, there's so many things in our own lives, in our own enterprises, that maybe, we should aim to go beyond what we're capable of, and take on bigger problems. And all right, let me pivot us a little bit here. So you said, let me see, I got all these notes and I don't know where it was. So you grew up in a coal mining town in North England?
Yep.
Till what age?
Till 18.
18. So you did something like work there at some point, right?
Yeah. So, look, it was a coal mining town, but it was the heart of the textile industry as well. And I mentioned,
that's what your dad did, right?
It was like the sort of post-industrial, or no, it was the full-on industrial era of Britain. So it was the 1970s, where Britain had its own coal industry and its own textile industry. And both of those became heavily unionized. And Margaret Thatcher, the conservative prime minister, basically took on the unions through the early to mid 1970s, and basically killed she killed the unions. And because she felt that they were being uncompetitive compared with, buying coal from China or whatever else. But all she did was just kill hundreds of communities that all relied on that work. And it's the same story wherever you go in the world. And the textile, I was closer to the textile industry in that area as well. And some of the old, the sort of the mill houses that you might have seen pictures of, old stone buildings where, they went from, where they had the first lathes and all of that kind of stuff. And so my dad worked there. And my first experience of work was like a summer job when I was about 14 or 15. And as you know, I play the guitar, and I wanted to buy my first electric guitar. And I said, Dad, can you see if you can talk to the owner of the mill to find me a job? So the only thing, they just built this new warehouse, and in the concrete pillars that held this warehouse up, there were the way that the concrete had been cast, there were these holes, like sort of 1-inch diameter holes in these concrete pillars. And the health and safety people had said, listen, if you leave these are going to be they're going to capture bacteria and stuff. So you need to fill these holes up. And so my job for 6 weeks of my summer vacation was to fill those holes with, and we used sort of doweling rod. He was like knocking pegs of wood into these holes. And that was my first experience of work. And that's all I did for 6 weeks, was just fill holes with wood. And but I earned enough to buy my guitar, so that was cool.
So other than the money to buy a guitar, would you say there was something else you took out of that experience?
Wow. I suppose just, yeah, that sometimes, that the ends justifies the means, and or the kind of, as long as you've got a mission and you're doing it with a purpose, as much as getting a guitar doesn't. It's not. I'd like to think my sense of purpose is a bit more elevated now, but it kept me going. And to be honest, it gives you, repetitive, labor like that. Funnily enough, you get into those flow states, you get into those zones where your brain goes into different places. And I think, and it's funny because I was, I was this young kid who was at school, and, I was kind of, my dad he wasn't like a director or anything, but he was a sort of middle manager. And I was working in the thing with just some of the regular workers who were there. And I think what I understood, whereas maybe some people who'd, were at the school that I was at or whatever would have had a sense of, no, like, in those days in the UK, there was this sort of almost like the class system, but actually, when we're all working and, there is no one, the chief executive or the design director or whatever is no more important than the guy knocking the holes into the wall. And that no matter what background, where you come from, whatever, when you check in, and I literally had to, you sort of check in your time card, everybody's the same. So I guess, some of those things stuck with me.
Now, so dad worked in management in that company.
Yeah.
Okay. Now what about mom?
So mom, she was, in her younger days, she was a dental nurse or a dental hygienist. And then for a long time, she was a stay-at-home mom looking after me and my sister. I have a sister who's 2 years older than me. But then when we weren't surviving on my dad's income, she went out and got a job as a market researcher, so somebody who would go and she ended up doing more kind of qualitative research, doing more like interviews with, business people or whatever. So she wasn't one of those researchers who would stop you in the shopping mall and get you to tick in the thing, but it was a similar thing.
Yep.
But she was, my mom was always very diligent, and, I suppose, we all grew up with that sense that, you've got to work to pay the bills. And she ended up doing really well in that career, and that second income into the family was absolutely essential for those days. And I think, I was so lucky. I mean, both my parents are still alive. As I said, my dad's 91, my mom's 82. They are the epitome of what I would say are just good people with the right set of values. They always put me and my sister first. They always put their community first, whether it was my dad's rugby club, whether it was the church that they belonged to, just that good sense of community. And I remember in my early days when I ended up in the advertising industry, and this was the sort of mid 1980s, where it was like the most indulgent, excessive time of the advertising industry. I mean, I worked for this London ad agency where pretty much, I think there were about maybe 20 people who worked for the agency who were driving Ferraris already. And the champagne trolley came round at like 3:00 on a Friday afternoon. Wow. And it was just because it was just indulgent. It was like, you remember the sort of Wall Street era, the Gordon Gekko era.
I mean, for movies, right?
Yeah, for movies. But this, honestly, this was like, and so there's this young kid who came from a, kind of working background in Yorkshire, coming down and having got into this thing, and it's like, wow. And you get, it's seductive.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to think that my parents kept me, or my upbringing kept me fairly grounded. And as much as I enjoyed all of those trappings and stuff, you know that it's pretty transient and that's not really what you need to be aspiring to. Mm-hmm. But if it comes with the gig, then enjoy it for the moment.
Sure. Now, is that because of like how the transition from textile early years to an ad agency, was that just because of a chosen education that you?
Yeah, well, good question. So I did okay at school. I got reasonable high school grades, and mm-hmm. originally, I suppose, like a lot of people at the time, I thought, I want to study law. I want to be a lawyer. But then my grades weren't quite good enough to study law, and then my school principal at the time said, well, just find something that looks interesting, study something. It was in the era where it was more about getting an education, and it wasn't so much vocational training. So unless you wanted to be a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant,
very specific.
Yeah. So you just went and studied humanities. So I ended up, and you don't know this about me, I ended up studying French and philosophy. So I have a combined honors degree.
So the language, and
so the language French and philosophy is a subject. And obviously there's a crossover because a lot of the
French philosophy.
Exactly. So I would study Jean-Paul Sartre.
Yeah.
Rousseau, Descartes, both more Sartre in the French literature side of things.
Okay.
Because it was all the sort of existential literature with Sartre and Camus and this and that. But then you'd be studying them from a kind of philosophical point of view in terms mm-hmm. of existentialism as a philosophical content. And you can imagine I was also playing rugby for the rugby team at the time. So you've got a guy. So you can imagine all the jibing I got from my teammates that, oh, you're studying philosophy. They were all doing like engineering and like really practical stuff. And I just found it interesting. And the good thing about philosophy, as you know, is it trains the brain to handle complex concepts and try and put some form of argument or rational structure to them. And it was only it was a 4-year degree, and I spent the 3rd year in France studying French and philosophy with French students. So that was quite challenging. But then when I came back, I hadn't really thought what I wanted to do. But I suddenly became aware of this industry called advertising. It never occurred to me that there was these TV commercials that you see on the TV. There's a whole industry behind it of people who make them and this and that. And anyway, I ended up thinking, well, this looks interesting. So in my final year, and I had to start applying for jobs, and those were the days before email. So I was writing letters, handwritten letters, and posting them to those ad agencies. And I was lucky enough to get interviews with a few of them, and then ended up being selected as a graduate trainee for Ogilvy, which is one of the big international ones. And I think it was my philosophy was far more useful in that, because if you think what advertising is about, is it's taking very abstract sort of value systems around how people relate to brands and products and trying to structure them into some kind of rational argument, and taking abstract creative ideas and trying to put some kind of argument behind them. And so I found that a lot of the philosophical training that my brain had was actually stood me in good stead. And I actually used it in my letter of application. I used the analogy of, how would, studying Jean-Paul Sartre help me be a better ad guy for you? And I kind of unpacked what it was that those philosophical studies had trained me for, and how I could apply that into understanding brands and creative work and this and that.
So something like, I have the capacity to take abstract concepts and make concrete statements.
Yeah.
Something like that, right?
Yeah.
And how does that, Oh, so this is extremely interesting to me, and that move, because advertising in that sense, so that's a great way to frame what it is. And in some sense, that's like storytelling, a bit,
Yep.
right? It's articulating, right?
Yep.
Articulating toward whatever end we're trying to guide you to, which is leadership, influence. And so all of this kind of, I imagine that the philosophical training and the ad experience all plays into even what you do today, and in terms of leadership and building capacity in young leaders. I guess talk to me a little bit about the journey of your own journey in just from a world in advertising and storytelling and to a more broad just leadership in general.
Yeah, cool. Well, I suppose it was that transition. So I started in the ad industry in London, it was the sort of the world capital of advertising, and then worked there for 4 or 5 years. And then that's when I came over to South Africa. And again, living through those early days of the transition to democracy, like I mentioned at the beginning, was amazing. And it gives you a context that, because you can be very, whether you're in advertising or accounting or whatever, and when you're a young sort of starting out on your career, you think this world that you're working in is the most important thing in the world. It's like the only thing that matters is what ad agency you're in, and you become really boring to other people who aren't in that industry, and a real dick, to be honest. But then when you come face to face with a social political situation like we had in South Africa, everything is put in context. And then within the advertising industry, so when I left Ogilvy and started my own business, you had in those days, understandably, this sort of moral, and it became a legal imperative to develop young talent, and particularly previously disadvantaged talent. So
tell me a little bit about that. Let's just assume that we don't know what we're talking about, and I know very little about this. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, it used to be called affirmative action, but it's basically now it's called broad-based economic empowerment.
Okay.
Broad-based Black economic empowerment.
Okay.
Which means that as a business, you have a scorecard and you are rated according to on a number of things. Firstly, your ownership. So to what degree are you Black owned? So the shareholders, are they, and Black is now, again, Black is, so it's people of color, let's call it that in the new way of speaking. But Black in the South African context touched on a whole bunch of racial groups who weren't necessarily, sort of
not
African.
white. Yeah, right.
Non-white, exactly. Yep. Yeah. So we have this weird stratification here. But anyway, so you're measured on whether you are, so the business is owned, the business ownership, to what degree is that Black? The business management, so the people on the board, to what extent? And it's not Black, and the good thing is it's Black and female. Yeah. So in all of these things, there's a sort of weighting to this. So then you've got, that second layer, then your third layer is your entire workforce, what percentage by racial mix and by gender. Then a fourth category of procurement and economic development. So to what degree are the companies that you're buying from or procuring services from or supporting in some way, to what degree are they, in their own way, empowered or affirmative? And that at the end of it, and then there's stuff on corporate social investment and this and that, but ultimately that spits out a score, and that determines whether you are level 1, 2, 3, all the way down to level 8 in terms of your what's called your equity scoring. And that determines whether you're going to get government contracts. That's going to determine whether other corporates want to do business with you, etc. So every company in the country has to abide by those rules. However, as always, there's people who see it as who reluctantly do it as a kind of what they would say is a price of doing business. I would like to think, and you hopefully you would know me well enough to know that I'm genuine in this, that I saw it as my moral imperative to do that as well. That I, at a relatively early age, became aware of my my whiteness and my privilege, particularly having grown up in the UK and coming and seeing that context. And funnily enough, one of my colleagues at work, he said that the thing that I it's like the finest compliment that he ever paid me. He's a young black guy called Sifiso Kabashe, and he's the Red Bull Amaphiko project manager in South Africa. He always says, look, Ian knows he's white. Which it's like my own sort of level of wokeness that I know I'm white, and I know I'm white and I'm privileged. So,
yep.
Yeah. And so from the days I started, even when I was a manager in somebody else's business, but then when I left to start my own ad agency, and then when I went to start Instant Grass, which was that business I mentioned, the youth trend spotting business,
Mm-hmm.
it was always my moral imperative to grow young black leaders, young black people, to again give them the self-belief, the sense of respect and integrity that they deserved, not because I was mandated to do it because of that scorecard system, but because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. So I'm interested in the mandate itself, but then also the statement that, because, I don't remember exactly who this was, but kind of in the someone, maybe you could tell me, a philosopher said, if the philosopher is the man that if all the laws were abolished tomorrow would behave exactly the way that they do today, because they're not guided by mandates from the law. So I might be breaking a law today because I'm not guided by that law, and I might be following a law today because there is another governing agent at work, right? And so for you go, I saw this is the right thing to do. There's a moral imperative here. But then you go, there's other people that are kind of pissed about this, going, look, this is the price of entry, it's the cost of doing business.
Exactly. Yeah.
And this is a complicated topic in general, just going any kind of like governmentally mandated anything, but you go, man, like given the circumstances and the situation we're in, we got to do our best to find the right way forward, to navigate, to create on-ramps. I, if you don't mind, kind of like, I'm just curious about your context and the reality of that situation.
Yeah.
Because it is familiar, right? So there's ways in which we talk a lot about kind of equity in, or equality in leadership and kind of in all of these levels, right? From ownership, management, the entire workforce, and then procurement and the kind of where you're buying from as well. Now that's been going on for how long now? Like that exists currently, right? And
that exists currently. It's evolved, but it's been going on. So the transition to democracy happened in 94.
Okay.
So the African National Congress had been in power. So that was Mandela's party. So he became president in 94. So that's 25 years. So really we've had 25 years of democracy in this country now.
So there's some interesting, just let's say, but like, for example, you said mom was was not a nurse, but it was in hygienist.
He was a dental hygienist. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And in something like nursing, you find a lot more women, right? And then you don't, you go to like brick masons and you don't find a lot of women, right? And so there are ways in which we select into certain career paths and things like that. But then there's also these systemic realities that exclude people because of these demographic, you're black, you're a woman, and I guess I'd just be curious to hear you kind of reflect on like how that's played out in ways, because I guess at the heart of this question, to be specific or to aim it, is like, just thinking of the idea of putting aces in their places kind of thing, like the people that can do the best job kind of. And so I think you want to make everyone have access and be available to succeed in these places. And yet at the same time, we also want to put the best people in the right position. So it's like, I want to have everyone have access to this job. And then if that person happens to not be a black female, so be it. And if it is, so be it, right? To create that. So you get I'm sure this is a common question in this. I'm just curious to hear you respond to that.
Yeah, look, it is a challenging situation. And because it is that imperative of you want the best person to do the job. But if there are two candidates who are within a few degrees of each other, and one's a white male and one's a black female, the black female will get the job.
Should apply a preferential option.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And that will happen. Yeah. Yep. And that will happen, as I said, for some reason, for some people, because it's the right thing to do, and for others, because it's the legislated thing to do. And, you improve your scorecard and all of those kind of things. Obviously, the fine line again becomes where there's a meaningful difference. Mm-hmm. That's where it becomes hard. However, again, you've got to look at the broader context of, if you zoom into that micro single job within organization level, it becomes hard. But if you zoom out to what you're trying to do within an organization on a far more macro level, which is build in diversity, not because it's the flavor, the social flavor of the month or whatever, but because it's good business.
Yep.
And particularly in South Africa, when 80% of your consumer market 80% is black, 55% of that is black female, then it makes sense for you to have people working in your organization who have deep understanding, empathy, and connections
lived experience
with your target market. Yeah,
for sure.
That's right. Sure. And so on a purely business related point of view, it makes sense on a macro sort of long-term level. And I think that's, again, you can, and it's a deeper, and I know we haven't got too much time.
Sure.
It's a deeper conversation about the role of business in society. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing that's happened now, I don't know if you saw it with the Business Roundtable in the States about 3-4 weeks ago. So I think it's the chief executives of the top 200. It's called, if you just Google BRT, it's called the Business Roundtable. And about 3 weeks ago. So again, it's a US based organization, top chief executives of the top 200 companies, and they all get together and define what is the purpose of business, or what is it to be a corporate citizen.
I did see this. Yeah. I did see this.
And in the past, so the old sort of economist theory, like Milton Friedman.
Bottom line.
Yeah, bottom line. The only thing you're responsible to are your shareholders. Mm-hmm. The only thing you do when you arrive at work in the morning is to build value and equity for your shareholders. Now they've just issued a new mandate. It's a 300-word statement, and the word shareholder only appears word number 250. And before that word, they talk about stakeholders, and those stakeholders are society, and the environment. So the role of business is to add value to its stakeholders, not its shareholders. And its stakeholders are the broader society. So it's people and planet alongside profit. So it's the old triple bottom line thing. But now it's been articulated clearly that therefore how we operate as microorganisms or organizations has to contribute to that greater good. So why in that situation, as I say, you might zoom in and think, right, that managerial position, that white male is infinitely more qualified than that black female. Yeah. Sure. Zoom out, look at the bigger picture, then make your decision.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's very interesting. So I just saw like a brief headline someone showed me about that meeting and the decision that was made, kind of the reworking of our understanding of what we're legally held to and what we need to do in terms of the execution of business. And kind of the word shift that's emerged a few times as we've been talking. There's this tremendous shift, encouraging shift that's going on kind of in the world of business and kind of in the globe. And I guess like the overlap, I think one illustrative overlap that I've brought up several times in other conversations is, so you having kind of history as a marketer or an ad man, I imagine being familiar with the role of greenwashing, right? To go, we're going to advertise all of this good that we do in the world. Even in my own experience, even recently there's all these like social entrepreneurship opportunities and you know, accelerators and pitch competitions. And, you know, I've run into several things that I've seen that I thought, this is a very interesting thing to call a social enterprise.
Yeah.
Based on my own understanding of something that is like primarily social, or like there's a problem we're solving, we're trying to figure out how to also make it sustainable, as opposed to, I was doing this thing anyway, it makes decent money, but I would love to be able to get into these social enterprise pitch competitions, and therefore I have baptized it and called it this other thing. But I don't want to be overly critical of that either, because I'm actually excited that this emerging language, this emerging situation, and even emerging roundtables like this are going. What I see greenwashing as is an indicator that we're moving that direction. And so it's like, we want to tell the story that we're doing that the same way we do with our Facebook feed. People want to look like a good human being that's decent to their neighbors, even though they may not necessarily be decent to their neighbors. Or, you know, I really love the poor, but I couldn't tell you one of their names, for example. Right. Exactly. Like, and it does seem like the move of marketing is going to move towards something like real meaning and purpose. Business is moving towards something like actual concern for stakeholders, for the environment, for the world. Ultimately, I think social enterprise hopefully will not even be a thing, because it'll just be the way we do business. Right.
Exactly.
And I guess, I don't know, because you're traveling around the world, working with people all over the world that are in this space that is gray, honestly, like in terms of, is it social? You know, I'm like, a lot of times I go, I am like my own work. I mean, God, even around the question of hiring, I'm like, I get to hire, you're talking about the specific micro. I'm like, I have enough to do half of a staff. Right. And I set out to go, I want to hire all these guys, but like, I need the best mechanic I can find for the cheapest amount of money to do this thing. Right. And of course, my partner, Chris, in this is, we've invested in him to make him a proper mechanic. But as we kind of grow through this, I go, man, it's the business side of things that we have to learn and grow in and figure out. And then there's others that are good at business going, we got to figure out how to care about these, but these things are coming together. And I guess I'd just like to hear you tell me about what you're seeing globally in this emerging, what I think is an emerging space, or at least coming into, maybe it's existed for forever, but it's becoming more primary or dominant in the space of what the market will look like down the road.
Yeah. Look, I think it's a really good question. And just before I answer it, I've got to jump off fairly soon with my, because I've got a call with our good friend Bruckner.
Nice.
Nice. Have a catch up with him. But yeah, I think when you would use the word greenwashing, and now I would expand that to purpose washing, because the big thing that all the ad agencies are talking about and all the marketers are talking about is purpose marketing. You know, let's find our purpose. But the problem is, it's sitting in the marketing departments, which is the spin departments. And unless the initiative that you're talking about, or the values that you are espousing, or the kind of mission that you're sharing with your consumers, unless that's lived within every aspect of the organization and endorsed from the top down, from the chief executive, then it's just that. It's just purpose washing, and it's transient, and it's I wouldn't call it evil, but it's just, you know, it's trying to seek commercial gain because they see this as a competitive advantage.
That's propaganda, right?
It's propaganda, exactly. So, you know, the people that you obviously relate to, the likes of Patagonia, you know, who founded the business with a core purpose from the chief executive downwards. And they make a shed load of money because they stick true to that purpose. But the challenge is, and I see it all over the place, and it's going to take a generation of leadership to change, because the people who are running the big organizations around the world were put in place because they are financial financially driven
Mm-hmm.
management school people
Mm-hmm.
who aren't put there because of their value systems. They're not put there because of their broader worldview. They're put there because they squeeze bottom line out of operations. And so it is, you've got to do it first, then talk about it. And so you've got to have the whole organization has got to believe in that purpose. But I absolutely agree that we will know that social enterprise as a concept has succeeded when it no longer exists, when it becomes enterprise. And part of what being an enterprise is that you have that sense of your social and environmental impact. Yeah. And the growth of the B Corp movement is trying to do that. It's trying to create some kind of authentic, or sort of verification
Criterion.
system.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that every, and they're now getting businesses signing up as B Corps who are, straight commercial organizations, but they just do business in a good and ethical way and have a clear sense of what their contribution is beyond their financial returns. And I mean, I had a really interesting meeting with a company this morning who they're a food technology business. They're an old family business here in Cape Town, but they're now, I can't say too much, but they have a new technology which is fundamentally good.
Mm-hmm.
That is going to do some amazing things for their consumers, for the planet, etc. And so if they do it and do it at scale, they will have far more social impact than anybody else or so many social enterprises have. Yet they will never call themselves a social enterprise. They're just a good business. Yeah. And that's what we have to be. We just have to be good businesses.
I love it.
So, yeah, I think, social entrepreneurship has become a bit of a buzzword, and it's become this sort of bubble a little bit that is floating off the ground. It's now hovering about 2 feet off the ground and losing touch with the ground or the community or whatever. So it's people like yourself who keep it grounded, and that as long as we don't, we don't become an echo chamber where we just listen to ourselves, where it's social entrepreneurs talking to other social entrepreneurs about social entrepreneurship, and nobody else really listens. So
I know you got to go, so let me see if we can close with one last question I've been trying to ask of everyone. What is
just
success?
Whilst you do that, I'm just going to message Brooke quickly.
All
Sorry
good.
Okay.
What is success?
Oh, so you're just going to throw that question in quickly and just let me answer it in a minute. I suppose I always, it's like how success is like, I was like, sorry, I'm just
go ahead and write the message. No,
I just, sorry, hold on.
What kind of dog is that?
I don't know. It's my neighbor's dog.
Okay.
Success for me is if I can look back on my life and know that I made a difference to, immediately to my family, but to my community, to the people, just that I had I don't measure myself on financial success at all. I mean, I've been lucky that I've done well and, earned money as in my previous careers. But I've never been and I often use this as an example. When did you ever go to a funeral and the person stood up and in the eulogy read the balance sheet of the individual? Nobody remembers how much money you made. It's all about how good a person you were and what a difference you made in people's lives. And so I've been privileged through this latest journey with Red Bull Amaphiko to be given a platform to be able to do that. But I feel, it's just the start. I was relatively late in my career when I was able to articulate my purpose beyond just being a good guy and doing good things for people. But now if I can, my purpose is helping people unlock and fulfill their own purpose. That's simple as that.
Well, thank you for doing that. Thank you for the ways you've been doing that for me and our relationship and for the rest of our crew through Amaphiko. And I know you got to bounce. So thank you so much for your time today, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks, John. Great to chat to you. Yeah. All right.
All right, man. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Yes, sir.